It's the week 4 edition of the Phil Steele Show. Trip Hurd, David Kahn, alongside our main man, Phil Steele. We're live again. So if you're following along on YouTube, jump into conversation. Tell us we're crazy. Tell us we're right. Give us some picks. I think we had the most views we've ever had last week. That's the second time that I've been able to say that this season. And we're only into week 4 right now. So over the next hour, we're going to preview around 25 games, get you Phil's top 3 plays of the week. We're going to try to get you that edge you need when you're placing bets this weekend. Phil, I don't know about you. I think I learned a little bit last week. I certainly had my doubts going into the game with Georgia and Tennessee, especially about the quarterback situation, but Aguilar was great. Gunnar Stockton made some just unbelievable throws under big-time pressure. So I think both those teams are going to be right there in the mix at the end of the season. What were some of your takeaways from week 3?
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. I thought coming out of the Tennessee-Georgia game, we had, Aguilar looks like almost an upgrade over Nico, and it's been very refreshing. Did have a couple of interceptions. That first quarter was awesome. And with Georgia, you look at them last week, and Stockton, I thought, did a great job on the road. It's his first road start, so it's a pretty rough environment to be playing in, and did a great job. So I'm really impressed with both teams in last week's game.
David, I think you've got we've got a sponsor here on the show now, Home Field Apparel. And I think you've got a box over there you want to tell us about.
I do. Home Field Apparel Trip came through with the gear delivery of the century. All right. This is called the Can't Miss Kickoff Box. All right. It is massive, and there's so much gear in here. Trip, you have some gear waiting for you on your desk. You have been reneging on your in-office duties this week, so you've not picked it up. But there is some Florida State swag waiting for you on your desk. I delivered it. I folded it nicely for you. It is ready for you to pick up. But I have a whole big old box of Tulane football gear ready to be worn and loved and appreciated. This box is really nice, by the way. I'm going to keep this box. I normally don't keep boxes, guys, but I'm going to keep this box. This is awesome. It feels like football. Yes, it does. It feels like football every time we're on the Phil Steele Show. But look at this, Trip. I got a hat. I got socks. I have a T-shirt, a long sleeve, and behind all of this, a nice little hoodie hiding at the bottom of the box.
Ooh,
all right.
Nice.
So I'm ready to rock all this stuff. While you talk and talk with Phil for a second, I'm going to adorn my new hat that I just got out of this box. And folks, if you see this gear and you go, I want some of that, just go to homefieldapparel.com, use the code PHIL15, that's PHIL 15, and you get 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com. Go do that. You can get sweet gear like this from Home Field Apparel.
Well, I'm actually wearing my Home Field Apparel shirt that I bought last year, my Charlie Ward shirt. When I saw this, I had to have it. I mean, Phil, you're old school. I think you'd probably agree. There's never been anybody that did it better than Charlie Ward. I think that comedian Bert, what's his name? He takes his shirt off all the time. They were like, who's your favorite Seminole of all time? And it wasn't Dion. It wasn't Peter Warwick. It was Charlie Ward. And that's where I got my start with FSU fandom, was that 93 FSU at Notre Dame game of the century. FSU lost that game. They ended up winning the national championship. I've been rolling with the Noles ever since then. But great threads. Thank you to Home Field. I swear it's so soft. Feels like it's not even like a shirt. It's like you're just wrapped up in a cloud. I can't even describe how great it is. But thank you to Home Field for all the gear. It's time to talk some football. Dave, you want to take us away to Thursday night?
I absolutely do. We've got a game on Thursday, and we start with Rice at Charlotte. Good rebound for Charlotte last week, Phil, after getting clobbered their first 2 weeks. Connor Harrell, a program record in completion percentage against Monmouth, nearly 87%, 382 yards, 3 scores. On the Rice side, bit of a homecoming for a lot of their coaching staff. You got Scott Abel, their GM, and 6 of his coaches coming from Davidson. 5 others last year were at Charlotte. Last year, we had a really tight game. 21-20, Charlotte wins at Rice, that game-winning touchdown with under a minute to play. Right now, it's Rice favored on the road at Jerry Richardson by 2.5. Are we in for another classic tonight?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tight, low-scoring game, much like last year was. When you look at Rice, they're now running the option, so it's completely different. Chase Jenkins is a guy that was moved to wide receiver. Now he's back at quarterback. Dangerous runner, and he's doing a good job. He's hitting 73% of his passes. They've taken on a tough schedule, Louisiana and Houston, in the first 2 games to open. But, Charlotte's played 2 tough games, App State, North Carolina to open. The thing about Monmouth last week is we've been using them on the Phil Steele Plus Tour. Monmouth is a pure over team this year. They have an outstanding offense. They have absolutely no defense. I think in their first 2 games, they give up a lot of points to 2 teams. They average like 225 yards per game the previous year, and they were giving up 400 or 500 yards to them. So I expect a much different type of game for Charlotte this week. I lean with the under in this one. I think Charlotte's offense has struggled against FBS foes. Now they've had some time to review Rice's offense, the option offense, so I think they'll be better prepared for it. I'm going to go with under in this one. I think it'll be a tight, low-scoring game.
All right, starting things off Friday night, we've got an Oklahoma State team that's looking to bounce back from their worst loss in, check this, 118 years. They lost to Oklahoma 67-0 back in 1907. That's when they were actual Cowboys, Phil. They were riding their horses to the game back then. They've got to get the ship steadied before Big 12 play begins. They've got Tulsa in town, 7:30 kick on Friday. Cowboys were pummeled by Oregon, 69-3. Coach Gundy did say they've had a good week of practice. He's being patient with his quarterback, Zane Flores. Thinks he's going to have a much better game against Tulsa. Oklahoma State 7-0 straight up in the last 7 in this series. They've covered in 6 of those, laying 11.5 at home on Friday night. What do you like here?
Yeah, I think the price is cheap. And I think when you look at Oklahoma State, it's going to be a tough year. We're going to look at Oklahoma State at the end of the year and say, that was not a very good year for Oklahoma State. So this is a very important game for them. They're coming off a big loss, off a bye. And I think normally when they play Tulsa, it's little brother versus big brother in the state of Oklahoma, and they probably don't put a lot of emphasis on the game. There's major emphasis on this. They need to look better. They're at home for this. And, with Tulsa, they started out, Kirk Francis was their starting quarterback. They have moved to Baylor Hayes now. Hayes was with Trey Lamb at his previous school and has taken over the starting quarterback job. This will be his first road start. He did see some action at the end against New Mexico State and played well, but this is a first road start for him. So add it all up. I think Oklahoma State needs to win and win big here. And I think the spread's cheap at 11. I'd lay 2 touchdowns at least in this one.
Yeah, definitely a must-win game if you are a Oklahoma State Cowboy. All right, other game on Friday, Phil. Iowa at Rutgers. The Scarlet Knights, once again, 3-0. It's copy-paste for Greg Schiano right now to start 3-0. It's 5 straight years for him doing that. But they're opening up Big Ten play. Their first real test as they welcome in Iowa at 2-1. Hawkeyes laying 2.5 in Piscataway. They've been battle-tested, though, on the road already at Iowa State. And Phil, Kirk Ferentz is really, really good at being a road favorite, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a good road favorite, and Schiano's not very good as a home dog either. So you add those 2 factors together, it makes you lean with Iowa. I do like the way Rutgers' offense is going this year. It's highly unusual. When I talked to Coach Schiano, he felt that this was probably the first year that they've had a legitimate Big Ten offense, and they are putting up 461 yards per game. Kelly McManus, a QB, hitting 73% with a 7-0 ratio. They lost their huge running back from last year in Kyle Monangai, but they're replacing them well. I like the way Raymond's running the ball. Campbell's running the ball. Both are averaging over 5.5 yards per carry. Defense is a question mark, though. So I think Rutgers has the edge offensively. I'm going to give the edge defensively to Iowa. Iowa's defense giving up just 178 yards per game. It looks like one of their normal top-notch defenses. Gronowski still struggling to throw the ball, but I like the way the run game's going with Williams and Peterson. I think it'll be a lower scoring game. Rutgers is actually number 1 right now on my special teams chart. They're racking up those block punts for touchdowns as usual, but I think a low scoring game, and I would lean with Iowa to come out of there with the win. And since the spread's under 3, that would lead me to take the Hawkeyes here.
Yeah, I mean, if it's going to be a low-scoring game, Phil, you have to lean with Iowa. Rutgers has scored 30 points in 7 straight games. So if they're going to go under that total, definitely going to lean with the Hawkeyes there, Trip.
You know where I'm going with that one. 44.5. Got to take the under now. We'll kick things off in the noon slate on Saturday with Syracuse on the road at Clemson. The Tigers, a surprising 0-3 ATS this season. But again, let's not overreact. Their losses are to LSU, who we think is pretty good, and Georgia Tech, who I've thought was a very good team for, since we've been doing this show 4 weeks ago. With that said, we still haven't seen a complete game from Clemson. Cade Klubnik, only 207 through the air last week. 73 of those were on the touch pass to Wesco. They need a lot more out of this offense. Now, on the other side, I didn't realize Angeli for Syracuse, he actually leads the country in passing. I know it's very early on in the season, but great clips from both coaches this week. Dave, you sent me the one from Dabo. He's basically like, hey, if you don't like winning, go ahead and fire me. That's fine. Fran Brown, he says he thinks it's crazy that his team is such a big underdog here, that Vegas got it wrong with Canelo and the Crawford fight. They liked Canelo, but Crawford thought different. Just great clips from both coaches this week. It's a big spread here, Phil, 17 and a half that Clemson's laying at home. What do you see playing out in Death Valley?
Yeah, the Clemson team that I saw in the preseason hasn't showed up yet. I think they show up this week. And, let me go back to Oregon for a minute. Last year, Oregon started out the year, and boy, they really struggled. They barely got past Idaho. They barely got past Boise State. Question marks for offensive line, giving up a lot of sacks. Is Oregon going to be able to handle the Big Ten? And then they go and run the table in the Big Ten and go undefeated for the season and finish number 1 in the country. I think we're going to see Clemson come back to that offense that I thought they'd have this year. I know Klubnik hasn't looked good, but Syracuse's defense will give up yards and points. You look at Tennessee in the opener, the Vols got nearly 500 yards against them. They've given up over 400 yards in each game, including 25 first downs and 408 yards to Colgate last week. So this is a get-right game for Clemson. They're not going to have to go. They struggle sometimes as a big home favorite because they go to their backup so much at the end of the game. This is not a backup in the fourth quarter game. So I like Clemson to win this one by 3 touchdowns, and I think their offense looks a lot better this week.
Yeah, and especially after all the comments that Tripp was bringing up from both coaches, Fran Brown and Dabo Swinney, Dabo's going to want to lay it on Syracuse if at all possible at home. All right, in the noon slate on Saturday, we continue a Big 12 ranked-on-ranked battle, pair of 3-0 teams. Number 17, Texas Tech, making their first ever trip to Salt Lake City, going to Rice Eccles to take on number 16, Utah. Utes favored by 3.5, depending on what line you're looking at. High total over-under at 57.5. These teams very similar, Phil. Both have scored a ton and not a lot of points, but neither have really played anybody. You've got 2 really good quarterbacks, and Devin Dampier hasn't thrown a pick yet for Utah. Meanwhile, Baron Morton almost has 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns through 3 weeks. So I think maybe home field advantage is kind of where you lean the advantage here, and that would favor the Utes.
Yeah, and I think Utah might be the stronger team overall. And if the home field advantage really is big here, if you look at McGuire with Texas Tech, he's got a great home record. I believe he's 15-5 at home. However, 6-10 on the road. First trip to Utah, so you're dealing with altitude, and you're also dealing with an unusual crowd you haven't seen before. The student section for Utah is outstanding. Utah's got a great defense. I know Texas Tech has put up great numbers on defense, only allowing 229 yards per game, but they haven't played anybody offensively. Utah has a great defense year in and year out. And offensively now with Devin Dampier, they've got Whittingham's best offensive line he's had in his 21 years, the home field edge. They're used to big games like this. I'm laying the points with Utah, -3 in this one against Texas Tech. I'm going to wait to see Texas Tech. They've got some tough road games. They got to play Utah, Houston, Arizona State, Kansas State. A tough road schedule for them this year.
Another noon kick out west in the battle for the Iron Skillet, SMU at TCU. This might be the last time we see this matchup for a while due to all the conference realignment. SMU's won 3 out of the last 5 of these meetings. But if you go back several years, even back to the 90s, this has really been advantage TCU in the series. It's a little bit of a revenge spot for the Frogs after losing last season in Dallas, 66-42. But there were some turnovers. SMU had 3 touchdowns off defense or special teams combined. The Ponies had a huge game from Rashard Smith. He's now in the NFL. This is a great rivalry. Fort Worth will be rocking. TCU laying 6.5 at home, but we should see a very motivated SMU team here this week, Phil.
Yeah, and you hit it on the head. Last year's game, the final score does not capture how that game was played. In fact, TCU had a 100-yard edge in it. So SMU was not 3 touchdowns better than TCU last year. TCU's playing with legitimate revenge. They're at home. They only played Abilene Christian last week. They jumped out to a 28-0 lead. They had the game wrapped up, so they put the team away in the second half, and that's why they only won that game 42-21. I do think TCU is playing extremely well. Love what they did against North Carolina. That was a dominant game. When I look at SMU, though, go back to that Baylor game. It's a fourth quarter. SMU leads by 14 against a very good Baylor team. Ended up losing the game in overtime. Baylor got a couple of late scores, but I think they're a strong team. They're a playoff team from last year. They're getting a full touchdown. Even I saw some 7.5s out there. I like SMU plus the points in this one. It should be a great football game, probably on the high scoring side.
Yeah.
Another one that I think could be high scoring, Phil, the total right now, 62.5. Arkansas at Memphis. Sam Pittman just loves playing at the Liberty Bowl, apparently. They've won that bowl game 2 times in the last 3 seasons, but it's their first regular season meeting since 1998. I think the biggest question is Arkansas's defense. We know they can score, right? Taylon Green, nation best, 11 touchdowns. Memphis, though, has scored 20-plus in 43 straight games. That's the longest streak in the nation, and Arkansas is allowing more than 330 yards per game. So I know Arkansas is favored on the road by 7.5, but can their defense hold up against Memphis, Phil?
Yeah, I think it will be a high-scoring game, so good call there. And I think when you look at Arkansas, they look like a pure-over team because the defense is very beatable, and the offense has been explosive. Love what Taylon Green's doing. Ever since like the 5th game last year, he had like a negative ratio to start. He's been unstoppable. He really has adapted to the Bobby Petrino offense. 11 touchdown passes, just 2 interceptions. He's also the team's leading rusher this year, so that's a big plus. Now, Memphis lost their longtime starter. Seth Hennigan was there forever, like 10-year starter. But Brandon Lewis comes over from Nevada and gives them a running dimension, something they really haven't had at the quarterback position. Got 190 yards rushing. I like how you go back 2 years ago in Nevada, Brandon Lewis was an inaccurate quarterback. Last year he was vastly improved. This year he's hitting 73%. He's somebody that really studies the game, is doing well. And we don't, in the magazine, we wait till the transfer portal's been closed for 5 weeks. So there's hardly any players that are not on the team that aren't on the magazine page. But they do have one in Cortez Bram, a wide receiver who came over late from Nevada. And he was their second leading receiver last year. And he's got that connection with Lewis. Looked really good last week when they played Troy. So I think they will be able to put points on the board. Love the way Sutton Smith's running the football. So I agree with you on the over. I also like Memphis at home. Memphis is 2 different teams, much like Texas Tech. Almost unbeatable at home. On the road, they're beatable, but they've been playing well on the road this year as well. I'll take Memphis plus the points in the shootout. Plus, Arkansas had Mississippi last week. And by the way, they could easily have won that game. They fumbled at the Mississippi 20 at the end of the game when going in for the game-winning score. They've got Notre Dame at home next week, so it's a sandwich spot for the Razorbacks.
We'll talk about another explosive team, North Texas. Off a nice 3-0 start to the season, absolutely dismantled Washington State last week, 59-10, the final there. Now they hit the road. They're taking on Army. I need the mean green here because I was on that under win total for Army. I think it was 7.5. I didn't expect them when the season started to grab that game at Kansas State. I feel like I'm a game off the pace here. So I need the mean green in this one. Funny note about last year's meeting between these two. Army won that game 14-3. That was the final score. Does anybody remember what the total was for that game?
It was like 62. And the reason it went under is each team would go on a 95-yard drive down to the goal line and get stopped or kick. It was a game where both teams moved the ball, but they just didn't score when they got in the red zone. And I had the over in that game, so I was frustrated as all get out watching it because both teams actually moved all game long, except they just didn't score points when they got down in the red zone.
No, you're 100% right. I also had the over, and it only went under by a smooth 50 points. But this time around, the over-under, I've seen it from 50.5 up to 52.5, depending on where you're looking. North Texas, though, a road favorite. They're laying 2.5 at Army. Who do you like this year?
Well, Tripp, you may have got one with the Kansas State one,
Yeah.
but you also got one with the Tarleton State win. So I think you're even as far as your Army predictions. You would have had them beating Tarleton State and losing to Kansas State. It just got reversed, and they're 1-1. I had North Texas last week. It's one of my top plays in the Inside the Press Box newsletter. Love that game. Second quarter, Washington State was turning the ball over. In fact, they were -5 in turnovers, but the turnovers weren't the thing. North Texas moved the ball, both running and passing. You could tell it was going to be a rout right from the start. And it was a first road start for Washington State's quarterback. When you have young quarterbacks making a first road start, all of them have seemed to have struggled this year. You could, Arch Manning, Michigan's quarterback on the road, a lot of that going on. And I think it really rolled for North Texas. Now, I'm concerned, North Texas-wise, with what they did the last time they traveled up north here. They played Western Michigan. They actually trailed the entire game against Western Michigan, got a score late, forced overtime, won the game in overtime, barely got it. And that's why the spread was so manageable last week against Washington State, a completely different situation. Well, now they got to go on the road and take on an Army team. And normally when you're off a big win, you have a letdown spot, but Army had an entire week off, plus their service academy team. They don't have the ups and downs the other ones do. They're at home. This is a must-win game. The last time they were at home, they lost to Tarleton. As much as I love North Texas last week, and there's going to be a lot of weeks I love them this year because they're one of my play-on teams, I think it's almost a must-win situation for Army, and they're the home underdog here. I'm going to take Army to pull the upset.
All right, into the 3:30 window, Phil, and we start with a big-time rivalry game, a rivalry that dates all the way back to 1894. Tripp, you were around then, right?
Yeah.
You played every year since 1945, Oregon and Oregon State. Number 6 Ducks welcoming in Oregon State. Oregon 3-0, Oregon State 0-3.
Ooh.
I looked this up. I believe this is the first time since 1950 that they have played this game where one team was undefeated and the other team was winless. And it was still Oregon and Oregon State. Oregon undefeated, Oregon State winless. 1950, I believe. That is a Google AI search, so not confirmed. But I looked, that's the best I could find. Oregon State just got spanked by Texas Tech and Lubbock. They got spanked last year by Oregon. They lost by 35. And the spread's 34.5. Vegas expects the same thing. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, and normally they play at the last game of the season, so it's tough to get through one team winless, the other one undefeated at the end of the year. So I understand 1950 is probably accurate because they usually played at the last game of the season. And when you look at this matchup, I like the comment Stan Lanning made after the Michigan State game last week. It was 34-0. Michigan State got a couple of late scores. So finals 34-14. You just won a game by 20 points. They asked Coach Lanning how he's doing. He's like, I wasn't happy with the way we finished. That's scary news for Oregon State because the last time they were at home, put the hammer down the full 60 minutes. They clobbered Oklahoma State 65-3. And I believe me and Tripp were talking about Oregon State last week. I had them off a misleading final. I said they may be able to play with Texas Tech in that game. You know what? Oregon State, no, you cannot play on Oregon State. They are just horrific as far as spread goes. I don't care if it's a long snapper messing up or whatever it is that's happening. I'm not betting on Oregon State. So the spread's under 35. Take Oregon, even though they have a big game against Penn State on deck. Take Oregon to lay the lumber here.
3 strikes, you're out, Phil.
Yeah,
we talked about it last week. 3 strikes, you're out. UCLA's in the same category. I mean, those guys. Geez.
UCLA ought to fire their coach after that game.
Yeah, they should look into that, shouldn't they? We need to check on. And honestly, I don't know if Wayne's listening right now. Wayne Cook, we feel for you, man. Oh. We really do. I know you're in a tough spot there. And I heard you invite Wayne to watch the games with you this weekend. Wayne, take a week off. Yeah. Go hang out with Phil. You deserve a bye week off after what you've had to witness the last couple of weeks. Maybe a little desperation in the air in South Bend on Saturday afternoon, right? One of the big stories of the season, Notre Dame off to this 0-2 start. But again, lost to Miami on the road, Texas A&M last week at home. The Irish definitely have to run the table to have any kind of shot at the playoff at the end of the season. I don't know about you guys. I'm a little bit tired of this whole mulligan thing in college football. If you were 0-2 in the 90s, there was a 0% chance of winning a national championship, but that's a whole nother conversation. Defense has not been up to the standard so far for Notre Dame, that's for sure. Now they draw a much improved Purdue team, honestly, under Barry Odom. Boilermakers were actually driving in the fourth quarter to make it a one-score game last week. They threw a pick, and USC took care of business, but that ended the upset bin. You have to think Freeman is really going to have the Irish motivated here. Do we finally get a cover from Notre Dame, Phil?
Yeah, I think we do. You go back to last year, they won 66-7. Now, granted, as you mentioned, Purdue's a much better team than last year. I mean, Ryan Brown having a good season at the quarterback spot. Now, keep in mind, last week they're taking on a USC team that doesn't play as well on the road. USC had to sit through a 3-hour weather delay. That's tough. You're sitting in a locker room. It's tough to get completely motivated for that. I think we'll see a much different USC team this week. And Notre Dame, I mean, losing, as you mentioned, to Miami by 3, to Texas A&M by 1, a game they led, and the A&M needed a late touchdown on 4th and 11 to beat them. And you're talking about 2 top 10 teams that they faced. This is still a dangerous Notre Dame team. I did like the way that Love and Price got going a little bit at running back last week. I do like the way C.J. Carr's playing. And at 0-2, you need a big game. And, they were off that loss to Northern Illinois last year and blasted Purdue 66-7. I'm going to lay the points here. I like Notre Dame big in this one. And I think when you look at Purdue at the end of the year, yes, it was a nice start to the year. They've been respectable, but it's going to be a long year for Purdue. And I do think Notre Dame has a good shot at making the playoffs still, even at 0-2. I think if they have an impressive finish. And I think the last team that lost a couple games like that, 0-2, and still ranked at the start of the year, was a Michigan team that ended up running the table and being right at the top again as well.
All right, let's go to a game that I personally can't wait for. 3:30 Saturday, Auburn, Oklahoma. Question marks for both of these teams coming into the year with new quarterbacks. Mateer for Oklahoma. Oklahoma's old quarterback, Jackson Arnold, getting a fresh start at Auburn. He's going to face his old team in Norman this week. Mateer and Arnold apparently played in the same district in high school, so they're familiar with each other. It's not their first meeting. Brent Venables, the coach for Oklahoma, he said he's not surprised at all with Arnold's success this year. Said, actually, he would have had a lot more success at Oklahoma if not for so many injuries last season on offense, especially at that wide receiver position there. So tough test against the Sooners defense. They've been very good so far. Can the Oklahoma Sooners cover this 6.5 line at home, Phil?
Yeah, as you know, Oklahoma's my number 1 surprise team in the country. I think they've got a great shot at making a playoff this year, despite finishing with a 6-7 record last year. The defense is the defense we expected. They're holding opponents to 300 yards per game below their season average. Offensively, last year they had 0 returning starters on offense. They were at one point were down their top 5 receivers due to injury. So Venables is absolutely correct that Jackson Arnold stepped into a much better situation this year. Better offensive line, better receiving core. But Oklahoma also has a better offensive line and a much upgraded receiving core. And they also have John Matera, quarterback, Ben Arbuckle calling the plays. Now, Auburn's played well. I love that. I mean, going on the road and beating Baylor, that was a big-time performance, a big-time win. Showed a lot. But I think Michigan's an even better team than Auburn, and Oklahoma is able to beat Michigan by 11 at home. I think they're the stronger team here. The home field edge is going to be big, and I like the Sooners to win this one by double digits.
All right, sticking to the 3:30 window, a older rivalry that gets renewed every couple of years now, apparently. Pair of unbeatens, Tulane at 3-0 at number 13, Ole Miss. Rebels laying 13.5 at home. Tulane already won their revenge game last week against Duke. They took the Darian Mensah Bowl. Now they try and avenge a loss from 2 years ago where they lost to Ole Miss in New Orleans, but they didn't have Michael Pratt in that game, Phil. Meanwhile, for Ole Miss, quarterback question. Will it be Austin Simmons or Trinidad Chambliss? And I think maybe a sandwich spot with LSU coming to town next weekend. Hefty spread for the Rebels. Do they cover? Or do my Green Wave have a shot?
Yeah, I'm leaning with Tulane here. I like the way they came off that last week. It just dominated Duke. 24. There was 24-3 at one point, and then Duke got a couple of late things there. Retzlaff looks good running the football. I'm surprised he showed as much running as he has, as opposed to what he did at BYU. And with Ole Miss, maybe you're better off starting Trinidad Chambliss. I mean, Chambliss looked great last week, shredding that Arkansas offense or defense. He had 71% 2-0 ratio. You know, Austin Simmons is a young quarterback who's got 4 touchdown passes and 4 interceptions on the year. Chambliss gave them the veteran quarterback, so I like that. Ole Miss hasn't been blowing teams away. They only beat Kentucky by 7. Arkansas was driving to win that game at the end. It was a 7-point game, and or a 6. I think it was a 6-point game. And they were you had Arkansas driving with the ball at the 20-yard line. So I think Tulane can keep it closer than the spread here. I would take the dog.
I love it. I have hope for this game now, Phil. Thank you. I'm going to be repping all this new Tulane gear that I just got from Home Field Apparel, including this long sleeve of the 1998 perfect season for the Wave when they went 12-0. This new lid, perfect threads. I'm excited. Can't wait. Give me 4 more tutties for Jake Retzlaff on the road, and Tulane pulls off the upset. It'd be tremendous. All right, sticking in the 3:30 window. Number 21 Michigan on the road in Lincoln at Nebraska. Cornhuskers 3-0. Michigan, their only loss, you already mentioned it, Phil, to Oklahoma. They finally gave Bryce Underwood all the controls last week, and they let him loose, and he certainly made CMU pay for it. 3 total touchdowns, 350 yards. Meanwhile, for Nebraska, this is kind of their first real test, right? They faced Michigan a lot as a ranked team. The last 4 times they faced them, the Wolverines were ranked, and Nebraska lost. But the Cornhuskers have that more experienced quarterback with Dylan Raiola, the sophomore, versus Bryce Underwood, the freshman. Does that make the difference, even with Michigan laying 1.5 on the road?
Yeah, I think it's a big difference. Let's take a look at Raiola last year. You know, Raiola got off to a great start, and then he looked like a freshman a good portion of the year. Only had 13 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Now he's a veteran. He's got 8 touchdowns, no interceptions. Granted, Akron and Houston Christian aren't that great, but Cincy's a pretty good team. In fact, I think Cincinnati's going to surprise a lot of folks this year in the Big 12. You go to Michigan, Underwood in his first road start, you know, they did limit him. They handcuffed him. They didn't let him have the full offense, and he struggled. Only 12 first downs against Oklahoma. Looked much better at home against Central, but now you're on the road again against a really good defense. You know, Nebraska's holding opponents 200 yards per game below their average. You're going to have the crowd there, and it's tough for a young quarterback. And as we saw with Raiola last year, I think we're going to see that with Underwood this year, ups and downs. I think Nebraska's might be the better team. And you look at this. If Nebraska beats Michigan, they play Michigan State at home, at Maryland, at Minnesota, Northwestern, USC at home, at UCLA. There's a chance this team could be 10-0 when they travel to face Penn State. You may be looking at a playoff team in Nebraska if they get this one at home. I like the Huskers here.
Huge game for Nebraska there. Thank you to everybody watching right now, responding in the chat. Jesse likes Oregon by 50 over Oregon State. Ewood wants to talk about NC State. That's coming up right around the corner here. We do have an ACC team on deck, Chapel Bill and UNC. They've responded to that blowout loss in the opener to TCU. They've had a couple of wins, a couple of covers against Charlotte and Richmond. Tar Heels back on the road this week to face UCF. Scott Frost was actually a quarterback for the Jets back in the 90s when Belichick was a defensive coordinator. He talked about this week how much respect he had for Coach Belichick. The Knights, they lost their quarterback, Cam Prancher, in the opener. He's been cleared to play, but the offense has churned out about 500 yards per game, just under that with Taven Jackson. So, Phil, you might have more info on the quarterback situation there, who they plan to roll out. But UNC defense has looked good against the lesser competition in the last 2 weeks. Can they keep it up in Orlando? I'm seeing the spread 6.5 that the Knights are favored by at home.
Yeah, and I've even seen it move to 7 today. I would stick with Taven Jackson. I like what he did when his one started at Indiana last year. I believe he originally started at Tennessee's VHT quarterback. Very dangerous. I personally would stick with him. And these are 2 of the biggest roster changes out there in college football. I know I went over the team with Coach Frost. A lot of the players that he was saying would be starters hadn't even been on the team yet. They added them after spring. And same thing with North Carolina. They added Gio Lopez, their starting quarterback, after spring. You know, the one player to watch in this game is Damon June at running back. They didn't give him a carry in the opening game. I was impressed with what he did against Charlotte when given action. He's a straightforward runner. He's getting 8-10 yards a carry, and he kept it going last week. In just 2 games, he's got 200 yards, 8.7 yards per carry. He may be the difference in this. I also like Lopez. I think the 2 teams very close, but add it all up, I'm going to say with two varying teams like this, I'm going to go with the better head coach. And frankly, I think Bill Belichick rates an edge over most coaches. I'll take Bill Belichick in this one in North Carolina.
All right, penultimate game in the afternoon window for us. James Madison at Liberty. The Dukes 1-1 coming off a bye week, making their first trip to Lynchburg since 2011. Meanwhile, Liberty's fallen on hard times, Phil. They've lost back-to-back games on the road at Jack State, at Bowling Green. The total only 47.5. So the question is, who gets right this week?
Yeah, well, first of all, I didn't think there was anything wrong with James Madison when they played Louisville. I thought they might have been the better team at times. They outplayed Louisville, had 19-12 first down edge. I thought the Cardinals got lucky to come out of there with a 14-point win as it was. So this is a dangerous James Madison team. However, Liberty, their problem is for the last 2 years, they have played down to the level of their opponent. They're 3-11 against the spread. And they're usually a double-digit favorite. And the game's close, and then they come back and win it late in the fourth quarter, or they lose the game outright. Last week, when you look at Liberty, they lost to Bowling Green, but they actually had the yardage edge. In fact, at the half, they had 193 to 133 yard edge. Jacksonville State, they gave them a couple of short fields, but those were on the road as a favorite where they play down to opponent levels. Now they're an underdog. This team's never an underdog. In fact, if you go back to 2020, they've been a regular season underdog 9 times. They are 8-1 as a dog, and they've won 6 of them outright. Also, Liberty rarely loses at home. I think they have 1 loss recently, in the last few years. Meanwhile, go back to James Madison last year. They lost their last 3 games on the road. All as favorites. They were favored at Coastal Carolina, or they were favored at Georgia. They were favored at App State, and they lost. They were favored at Old Dominion, and they were favored at Georgia Southern. And they also lost 3 of the last 4 they lost. They lost to ULM. They did beat Old Dominion in a close one. So they struggle on the road. Great home team, great underdog. I'm going to take Liberty plus the points in this one.
Let's jump back to the ACC. This is a game, NC State at Duke. We talked about this on the show a couple days ago, a couple shows back in your College Sports Now feed. Stephen Hartzell, he said it was a fishy line. He tossed this up to Roddy Jones. He said Duke being favored after the last couple of weeks. I think they're laying 3.5 at home. Roddy Jones kind of pushed back. He said he thought Duke was the better team, that they were definitely the better team against Illinois. The score didn't really indicate what happened in that game. Really, everything that could go wrong has gone wrong for Duke. They've turned the ball over. But in this series, the Blue Devils are 4-1 straight up and against the spread in their last 5 against NC State. This should be a really entertaining game to watch in Durham on Saturday afternoon, Phil. I don't know where to lean here because Duke, the turnover bug, I don't know if they can get past that. And NC State's been on a roll here.
Yeah, and I wasn't blown away with NC State the first 2 games. I mean, East Carolina was driving late, down 7. Virginia was driving late, down 4. Could easily have lost both those games. And then they went and trailed Wake Forest. They gave up a kick return touchdown, the opening kickoff. Trailed Wake Forest 24-17 at the half, and then they dominated. Yeah. Wake Forest went a stretch, basically 2 full quarters without getting a first down, and the first down came on a targeting penalty. So I think that they're getting better. And there's a thing about belief in a program. When you get these early season wins, you start gaining more confidence, more belief, and I think we're going to see that at NC State. We're going to see them get better and better each week. They've got Virginia Tech, Campbell coming up. They could be 6-0 when they face Notre Dame. That would be a great mark there. With Duke, as you mentioned, Roddy's exactly correct. First half, I thought Duke was a better team than Illinois.
Yeah.
But the second half, turnovers hurt, but also Illinois put up like 300 yards in the second half against them. So they got weaker. And then Tulane last week sort of dominated the game, especially early on. So I think when you look at these 2 teams, you have NC State pointing up, and they're a 3.5-point dog here. And these 2 schools are very close. I expect a good amount of NC State fans here in the stadium for this one. I'm going to take NC State plus the points.
Phil, you mentioned the word belief, and I think that is the perfect word to transition to our next matchup, West Virginia at Kansas, because the Mountaineers, they now have a whole lot of belief as they come back, get that 10-point comeback victory, win the backyard brawl in overtime. Now they start Big 12 play on the road at Kansas. Jayhawks favored by 13.5 in Lawrence. They're coming off a bye week after the Border War loss. They want revenge for what happened last year in Morgantown. And I hate it for my Mountaineers, but I feel like this is a big letdown spot for West Virginia after that huge comeback against Pitt.
Yeah, and, I do a West Virginia podcast each week, and the guys were saying that, here it was pretty much a half hour after the game ended, and the fans were still, the crowd, this whole stadium was still full. They're singing, they're celebrating. It was a great, great victory for them. They were down 10 points with 5 minutes to go in that game and ended up winning it in overtime. So tremendous comeback. Now, I do like what Mark Eel did at the end, and you saw the offense really get rolling there. So I thought they did, and they gained confidence. They now know that if they're down in a game, they can come back late. We saw the same thing with Pitt. Remember, Pitt was down 10 to West Virginia last year. They won that game, and they started to gain confidence. They actually opened the season 7-0. However, West Virginia's roster, Kansas roster, two different things. Kansas has a more stable roster. They've got Jalen Daniels at quarterback. Jalen Daniels is a guy who looks like he did a couple years ago. Remember last year, he was an interception machine early on. And then he had 12 interceptions of just 14 touchdown passes. This year, he's got 9 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions. I like that. I like the way that Kansas played against Missouri. It's a game they should have covered. Missouri got that 66-yard run when they were running out the clock at the end of the game. Now, Kansas is at home, off a loss, off a bye. I love that. West Virginia is off a massive win over their backyard brawl rival and traveling across the country to play Kansas. And Kansas, as you mentioned, playing with revenge here. They had that game locked up. They were up by 2 scores against West Virginia last year, and West Virginia ended up pulling out the win. So add it all up. It's a high spread, but I do think Kansas is that much better and at home in a great situation.
Little upset with West Virginia. I let Pitt work their way into my card on Saturday. One of the 2
my lock of the
I
week
had on my card. Yeah, that was your lock of the week. That's right. We were concerned a little bit last week with Missouri being in a sandwich spot, but Ahmad Hardy quickly put that to rest. He had 250 yards on the ground. He's been phenomenal for the Tigers, who will host South Carolina at 7 p.m. on Saturday. Lenore Sellers knocked out of the game last week against Vanderbilt. The Gamecocks unable to score after his exit. They had Luke Doty subbing in. Mizzou's rolling here. They have the revenge factor from last season. They lost 34-30 at USC last year, but they're laying, I'm seeing 9.5 right now on FanDuel. Phil, what do you like in this one?
Yeah, and you could tell Lenore Sellers is going to play because this number was like 13, and then all of a sudden it dropped to 10 and 9.5. So it tells me Lenore Sellers is going to play for this one. I have been nonplussed with South Carolina in all 3 games, and frankly, one of the reasons I thought they weren't a playoff contender this year was that the strength of their team last year was the defensive front 7, and they lost 6 of their top 7 guys off the front. So they're not as dominant defensively. I thought Virginia Tech outplayed them at times in that game. Then they get by South Carolina State. It was mostly, I think they had 3 return touchdowns in that game. They weren't dominant at the line of scrimmage. And Vanderbilt, yes, they lost Lenore Sellers in the first quarter, and that had a major impact in the game, but still came up short 31-7. Missouri, on the other hand, has been really good. And even the Kansas game, which they had no business covering, they still had a dominant yardage in that game. So they're playing really good defense. And Ahmad Hardy, this guy's got to be leading the nation of broken tackles. I mean, you could have 1 guy, 2 guy hit him, and he's still going to go and break more tackles. He'd be right up there for my first team All-American running back right now because he is playing just like that. Bo Pabula looks good at quarterback. I got to go with Missouri minus the points and, let that spread drop under 10. I think they're the better team at home playing with revenge here.
All right, there you go. We've got a big game in South Florida on Saturday night. A game that if both of these teams could lose, I would really love it as a Florida State fan. We've got the Gators taking on the Canes in Miami. Miami up to 4th in the nation in the rankings right now. We probably talked more about the Gators, though, to this point. Back-to-back losses now. Lagway tossed 5 picks last week in Death Valley. Even with the 5 picks, it was still a competitive game against LSU. Bright spot for Florida would be the defense. They haven't allowed more than 20 all year, only 2 touchdowns in 3 games. But now they're going to face Carson Beck, rejuvenated in Coral Gables. Threw a couple of picks last week, but he also had 3 touchdowns, went for 340 yards against South Florida. Canes defense has also looked good after kind of a concerning finish to last season where they gave up over 80 points in their last 2 outings. Miami's laying 7.5 at home. What do you like here, Phil?
Yeah, I think talent-wise, these teams are closer than that number. And
Mm-hmm.
keep in mind, last week, Florida had a 23-10 first down edge against LSU. It's before the half. You got a 10-10 game. Florida gets the ball. Now, Napier's very aggressive as a head coach. So even with like 20 seconds to go in the half, he's like, we're going for it. Throws an interception. LSU kicks a field goal. Now you're trailing at the half. And then the only way LSU scored in the second half was on an interception return for a touchdown. So as you mentioned, -4 in turnovers, and yet only lost the game by 10. And the 10 points that LSU scored to get from 10-10 to 20-10 were via the turnover. I think as long as Florida, A, doesn't shoot itself in the foot like it did against USF, B, doesn't turn the ball over like they did against LSU, they can easily play with Miami. I think talent-wise, these two teams are equal. Miami has looked a lot better. I see Miami probably winning this game at home, but I think it's going to be tight. And I'm going to take the points with Florida in this one.
All right, marquee matchup of the night slate. Number 9, Illinois in Bloomington at number 19, Indiana. Both these teams 3-0. Hoosiers favored at home by 6.5. Illinois already got that big road win at Duke, and this is the start of a very tough stretch for the Fighting Illini, Phil. 3 ranked opponents in 4 weeks. You got USC and Ohio State coming up. Meanwhile, for Indiana, they haven't played anybody yet. I feel like this is a playoff eliminator game for the Big Ten, with possibly getting that 4th team in there. You mentioned Nebraska might be there, but either one of these teams with a win in this game, I feel like could be in pole position for that 4th spot behind Oregon, Penn State, and Ohio State.
Yeah, it's clearly an early season playoff game. I think the winner has a shot at the playoff. The loser is out of it. And so it's a huge, huge game. When I look at both teams, while both had double-digit win seasons last year, I think they're both stronger. When I went over the roster with Coach Signetti, I think Indiana is an improved team. Deeper at running back. Quarterback, they got great play out of Curtis Work, but I like Fernando Mendoza. The receiving core with Cooper and Surratt looks great. They have a star at all 3 levels, and the defensive line, linebacker, and DB. They're a really good team. Illinois, I think, is a touchdown better than last year. Last year's squad, well, they got the 10 wins. They had a lot of close ones. They weren't dominant. This year's team's much better. I wasn't thrilled with the first half against Duke, but they still won that game 45-19. So this is a good Illinois team. And now they've tested on the road. I rated it a pure toss-up. And I think earlier in the week when the line was like 4.5, I was like, I don't even know if I'd like. But now it's climbed to 6.5. I think if somebody wins this game, it's probably by 3 or 4 points. We got ourselves a hell of a ball game, hell of a game to watch this week. So I'm going to take the large underdog here with Illinois.
Yeah, and Home Field Apparel is here this week too. So make sure if you're going to be in Bloomington, you check out the Can't Miss Kickoff Tour presented by Modelo. They've got events on Friday and Saturday. On Friday night, they got a happy hour at the Upstairs Pub with some free giveaways. They're going to be at a live taping of the Crimson Cast live podcast from 4 to 5. On Saturday, they're doing a tailgate from 1 to 6:30 at Camp Crimson, their tailgate and pop-up shop for Home Field. So make sure you get out there for that and check out homefieldapparel.com for all your college football apparel needs. They have amazing stuff, more than 190 colleges and universities. So get to Bloomington, go hang out with Home Field Apparel this weekend. They'll be there, and it's going to be a marquee matchup.
As planes fly over my rooftop here, I live close to the Greensboro airport, and it's apparently pretty busy right now at PTI. Sorry for that. But Jesse in the chat, he likes the Gators. Phil, he agrees with you. He thinks they're going to shock the Canes. Let's talk some Apple Cup. Is this where the wheels come off for Washington State? They're blown out last week, and they're a 3-touchdown dog in the Apple Cup, a meeting they won last season. Quarterback Jackson Potter got benched at halftime last week. Jimmy Rogers says he's reevaluating the position. That's not ideal in week 4 of the season. Huskies don't really have that problem. Damon Williams has looked good. Washington's off a bye. They've got revenge. I know it's on the road, but not a promising situation here for Washington State.
Yeah, and had Washington State not beat Washington last year, I'd say, yeah, they might have a chance of hanging in this one. But I think the revenge factor is going to be huge, especially against a rival. And as you mentioned, when you have quarterback questions like they do right now, that's not a good thing. You know, Washington's got 2 6'4" cornerbacks. So if you're throwing interceptions to those guys, it could be trouble. They got Jonah Coleman at running back. They got Damon Williams, an explosive quarterback who's really needs to get into form. And they've got Denzel Boston at running or at wide receiver. So they have a load of talent there. Last year in the spring, I think they had 6 guys available on the offensive line. This year they have like 16. So it's a much upgraded offensive line as well. It's a really good Washington team. Now, the only negative here is you're laying a lot of points. Washington's got a game next week. They host Ohio State. That's a big, big game for Washington. If they start peeking ahead, then the rivalry dog comes into play. But I would have to take Washington minus the points here.
Yeah, we'll see if Washington maybe overlooks their rival this week with the big point spread. Don't think that'll be likely, but we'll see how that one plays out in the Apple Cup in week 4. Weird to have that one in week 4. Arizona State at Baylor is where we go next. 7:30 kick in Waco. Both teams 2-1. The Sun Devils rebounded nicely last weekend versus Texas State, Phil, but Sawyer Robertson, he just continues to sling it for Baylor. 1,070 yards, 10 touchdowns. Baylor, these are two teams that are basically polar opposites of each other. The Bears have the 4th best passing offense in the nation. Arizona State is the worst passing defense in the Big 12. Arizona State, top 20 rushing offense. Baylor, 3rd worst rushing defense in the Big 12. What's the play here, Phil? What do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to lean with Baylor in this one. And normally, I think Arizona State's playing better defense this year. In fact, they're holding opponents to 184 yards below their season average, which is one of the tops in the country. Baylor, meanwhile, allowing opponents 17 above. Yeah, I can't get that Auburn game out of my head. They couldn't stop them. And same thing with Smooth. SMU was moving the ball all over them. And that's surprising for a Dave Aranda defense. But offensively, I think Sawyer Robertson's playing much better than Sam Leavitt at this point. Leavitt has a 5-3 ratio. Robertson a 10-2 ratio. I'd like to see another running back emerge for Baylor. Remember last year was Bryson Washington and Dawson Pendergrass. They had the 2-headed combo. This year it's basically Washington. I haven't seen another running back emerge. But I think the home field edge is huge. And could you imagine if Baylor hadn't been upset by Auburn and Arizona State by Mississippi State? We'd have 2 3-0 teams. I think this is still, neither team has a conference loss. Both teams are legitimate Big 12 contenders. Great game, but I'm going to lean with Baylor at home, give them the home field edge, and that'll be the difference.
Our buddy Daryl Turner has joined the chat. He had all those picks last week. He's back in. Jesse wants to talk Wyoming, Colorado, and that just happens to be the next game on the list here. How about, could we potentially be talking about an upset in Boulder on Saturday night? We've got the Buffs hosting Wyoming. Buffs favored by 13.5. I don't know if I like it, though, Phil. Colorado did surprise me in their opener. They were very competitive with Georgia Tech, even though the Jackets turned it over 3 times in the first 8 minutes of the game. Colorado really struggled last week. You nailed that one. The Houston defense held up again. Connor Wegman, they were able to go up and down the field against Colorado. Is there any chance Wyoming hangs around here in this one?
I'm leaning with Colorado, coming off a loss at home. They're a really good home team. I like what they did in the second half against Georgia Tech. And the Houston game, you're playing musical quarterbacks. That's not necessarily a good thing. In fact, I think they go back to Salter this week. That doesn't make me crazy about Colorado, but I haven't been that impressed with Wyoming. Last week, they gave up 541 yards, 31 first downs to Utah. Utah just shot itself in the foot numerous times in the first half. They had 272 yards and only 3 points. They laid it on in the second half and got the 31-6 win. Earlier, when they played Akron, it was 3-0. Akron throws the ball in the end zone, intercepted when they could have taken a 7-3 lead. And Arizona State got 2 big passes. Chris Durer, who's their top wide receiver, hauled in like a 42-yard pass late in the game, which gave them a cover at Akron. So nonplussed with all 3 of Wyoming's games. I don't know if they're capable of going on the road against a Power 4 team and winning. And Colorado plays their best ball at home. So I'm going to lean with Colorado on this one. There's plenty of games coming up where I'm going to lean against Colorado, but this would probably be the situation where you want to take them at home off a loss in a pretty desperate situation.
All right, we continue to chase in the late night. Last one for me at the FBS level. Got an FCS play for you coming up, Phil, so be ready for that. How about Cal at 3-0? The Cal Bears at 3-0 at San Diego State, 1-1 for the Aztecs after getting blasted last week by Washington State, 36-13. Cal with 3 straight double-digit wins for the first time in 16 years. Jaren Keave-Sagapolatele, back-to-back ACC Rookie of the Week honors. 3 tutties, 279 pass yards versus Minnesota. And the Bears favored by a very healthy margin of 12.5 on the road at San Diego State. Where does this one play out, Phil?
Yeah, I like San Diego State in this one, plus the points. Now, it's tough going against Sagapolatelli because he's looked great. He looks like the VHT that he is. And, a lot of the talk in the offseason was, all these Cal running backs have transferred. And I said, I thought Cal last year had a below average running back core. I mean, their top 3 running backs barely got to 1,000 yards. And this year you look at their top 3 backs and they're up to about 330. They're going to probably easily top last year's rushing stats. Plus you got Sagapolatelli. But a couple of factors here. These teams have met 9 times since 1982. The home teams actually won all 9. So I like that. And I also like the fact that you look at the head coach for San Diego State, Sean Lewis, 7-3 as an underdog. And then you just have to delve in close to get into Justin Wilcox. Justin Wilcox, one of the best underdogs out there. Away dog, home dog, doesn't matter. Not a great favorite. And in fact, as an away favorite, he struggles. As a double-digit favorite, it's even worse. And so they're on the road as a big favorite at San Diego State. Even though San Diego State lost to Washington State earlier in the year by 22, I'll take the Aztecs plus the points in this one with a poor favorite.
All right. Stand out west, USC back at home with an 11 o'clock kick taking on Michigan State. If Spartan fans want to see their team get to 4-0, they're going to have to stay up really late to do it. Their coach, Jonathan Smith, he's had some success in the Coliseum. He actually led Oregon State to their first win there since 1960. That was back in 2021. But the Trojans, very tough at home, especially last year in Big Ten play. 3-1. The only loss was that to Penn State in overtime. You think USC gets it back rolling here this week, Phil?
Yeah, they led Penn State the entire game,
Yep.
as you recall, and ended up losing in overtime. So that was a really tough loss for them. Yes, USC's a much better home team. And I think the key to me in this game is that 11 o'clock start. And the one thing I'm seeing this year, Trip, is that you go back earlier in the year, Georgia Southern played Fresno. Georgia Southern's beaten Fresno 14-13 at the half. And then once it turned past midnight, Fresno dominated the rest of the game. You go back to Boston College against Stanford. I think Boston College had close to 300 some odd yards in the first half. In the second half, once it turned past midnight, they put up like 60 yards in the second half. It was a completely different game. And there was a third one out there that happened on the coast where the other team just dominated the second half. The West Coast team did. So this thing's going to be ending at 2-3 in the morning. I think you're going to see USC have a big second half in this game. And also with Michigan State, while they're 3-0, they're actually 0-3 against the spread. I thought BC outgained them in that game. Last week against Youngstown State, the score is 34-24. Michigan State's running out the clock at the end. They get a 22-yard run for a touchdown to beat Youngstown State by 17. And, of course, the Western Michigan game, while they only won by 17, that's one that they probably should have covered because Western got an interception return for a touchdown late. But 0-3 against the spread. I'll take USC, and I would play USC second half in this game. I think Michigan State can keep it close early. But once you get to 1, 2, and 3 in the morning, I'll take USC.
Our first second half play of the year coming from Phil Steele. I love it. All right, Phil, we'll close with this one because an extra play for you this week. My father has entered the chat. All right, he's watching the show. He is a Harvard alum. And actually, even more so, my father's going to be on the call for Harvard at Stetson this weekend. He is going to reprise his role when he was a student back at Harvard in the 80s. He was on the air as a radio broadcaster. He's since hung up the headset, but the student radio station has asked him to come back, be an analyst with the student they're sending to Stetson. So he needs to know the play for this weekend because Harvard, FCS top 20 Harvard, is getting 39.5 on the road against Stetson. He says the Crimson have 2 Phil Steele All-Americans, though. First time playing in Florida. What do you think, Phil?
They're laying 39.5, right?
Stetson is favored by 39.5.
Oh, wow. I'll take Harvard.
You got me.
Yeah. You go back to last year, Harvard beat Stetson. So
let me check that line. My dad may have phrased it wrong, Phil. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing.
Because Harvard beat Stetson last year 35-0. They had 356 101-yard edge.
Harvard's favored.
Harvard's favored. All right.
Harvard's
favored. That would make a lot more sense. Yes. I think Harvard will win this game big. They won last year big against Stetson. Stetson's a team that opened up 2-0 last year. And they lost every single one of their games down the stretch. Got blown out of the water. They did play well early against Warner, but of course Warner's not even an FCS school. So I got to take Harvard in this one. And I would love to listen to your dad on the call. That would be outstanding. Tell me how to listen to that call with the game.
I don't even know. I'll get you the link. Dad's in the chat commenting right now. So Dad, send the link and we're getting it to Phil Steele. You'll have 2 listeners this weekend at least.
And he says Stetson did not score last week or what? He did not.
Stetson didn't score in last year's matchup, and they also didn't score last week.
Okay.
Yeah, Chattanooga beat them 63-0 last week. It wasn't even close.
There we go.
Stetson was laying 38.5 points. I would
No, he typed it wrong. Bless his soul. My dad doesn't gamble. So,
all right. Well, that leads us into does Harvard make it into your top 3 plays of the week this week, Phil? Let's have it.
They don't, unfortunately, but I didn't know that Harvard was an option. So keep that in mind. It's all 3 games we've talked about so far. I'm going to go with Memphis at home against Arkansas. Memphis is a great home team. And Arkansas is in the sandwich situation. I'm going to go with USC. Once again, I think it's a big second half for USC, and all of a sudden they get the cover at the end. And then how about that sneaky one at the beginning? I think Liberty is very underrated at this point. Play to the level of their competition. If they play to the level of James Madison, which isn't as good on the road as they are at home, you got a great home team. I'm going to go with Liberty plus the 9.5 over James Madison.
All right, you heard it, folks. Memphis, USC, and Liberty. DK, what do you got?
Yeah.
You got to play for us this week?
Yeah, I got one. I don't love it, but I'm gonna roll with Phil.
I don't like
here.
the intro there. Yeah, I got one.
Well, I didn't really have a strong one, so I was like, I'm gonna look at Phil's picks, and I'm gonna take the one that he convinces me on the most. And he convinced me on Nebraska. All right, give me the Cornhuskers plus 2.5.
Cornhuskers plus 2.5. Yeah, they need it. That would be a huge win for Nebraska. Phil, do you have anything else you want to plug here before we get out of here, wrapping up this week 4 edition of the Phil Steele Show? Can you tell us about philsteele.com, all that good stuff?
Yeah, real quick. I've got the Phil Steele tour with selections up and available. You have 5 selections and 4 quick hitters, and that should be up and available for you right now. And if you take the tour today, there's a code on there which will get you my Inside the Press Box newsletter, which is a $20 value. You get a complete write-up on all 51 FBS versus FCS games and all 13 FBS versus FCS games. So 64 games written up, 4 best bets from me, 4 best bets from my computer. It's a $20 value, and it's free. Take the tour, find out how to get that free newsletter, and then get the newsletter for crying out loud. Had a nice winning week last week. Once again, for Inside the Press Box, it's a $20 value, and it's yours free. Just take the tour and find out how to get it.
10-5.
Got to get that edge. David, you want to tell us about home field one more time before we get out?
I'll never stop talking about home field, because if they're going to continue to send me sweet gear like this Tulane hoodie, all right, look at this thing. I mean, it is thick. It is beautifully designed. It's so soft. Look at the back trip. I mean, I'm going to wear this all weekend when Tulane puts the hurt on Ole Miss. All right. As Phil said, take Tulane, give it to me. Homefieldapparel.com. Use the code PHIL15 for 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com. They've got quality, thoughtful apparel for more than 190 colleges and universities. Make sure you check out their Can't Miss Kickoff Tour. They're in Bloomington this week. Huge game in the Big Ten. Illinois at Indiana, pair of 3-0 teams. Illini starting a very tough stretch. Go get yourself right with the Home Field Apparel Can't Miss Kickoff Tour in Bloomington. Events on Friday and Saturday. You can find out more on Instagram at Home Field Apparel, on Twitter at Home Field Apparel without the E at the end. And that's where you can go to find out more from them. And homefieldapparel.com. Use our code. Get yourself some sweet gear. You'll love it. We promise.
All right. That's the show, folks. Enjoy the games this week. Catch us next Thursday at 11 Eastern time. We'll be back live here on YouTube. Appreciate all the views, all the interaction. We'll catch you next week here on the Phil Steele Show.